Thank you everyone for joining us today for an exciting webinar on responsible gaming for the online gaming industry. We have an esteemed group of panelists here today to help answer some key questions throughout the industry, and we hope you find it insightful. Before we get to the questions, I'd like to introduce our panelists. Let's turn it over to Liz to introduce herself first.
Thanks, Seth. I'm Liz Lanza, and I am the Director of the Office of Compulsive and Problem Gambling for the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board.
Great. Laura?
Hi, everyone. I'm Laura McAllister Cox. I'm Chief Compliance Officer for Rush Street Interactive.
Terrific. And Stewart?
I'm Stewart GROUMOUTIS. I'm the Director of iGAMING Operations with the BC Lottery Corporation.
Great, thank you. So as you can tell, we have a couple of operators with us, and Stewart sort of sits in that middle as a government regulated entity that's operating in his jurisdiction, and Liz represents the regulator side. So we'll have good voices here to contribute to this discussion all around. And we're going to start by asking all three panelists this question. Do you think it's the right approach to have separate self-exclusion program run for just online gaming? So there's been talk about some jurisdictions that prohibit players from participating in all forms of gambling, land-based, online, lottery, whatever the case, and others that you can exclude just for the activity in question. So we're on online gambling in this panel today. Liz, let's start with you, because your state, I think, does it separated by category. Can you explain if you think that's the right approach?
Sure. So in Pennsylvania, the way our Gaming Act was written, we had to silo the different self-exclusion programs. In the beginning, I was really pushing for one list. We have 4 in Pennsylvania, and I was pushing for one list for iGaming and casino self-exclusion. I was told that it can't be done the way our law was set up. And now that we have it separate, I can definitely see that there are pros to having it separate. It's definitely, depending on the person, it can be a completely different experience. So we do have individuals who want to be able to continue to wager at a casino. They perhaps don't live close to one of our casinos, so they may go once or twice a year and enjoy that. But they're not able to gamble responsibly when it comes to iGaming. So I can see pros and cons to both. Where it's a con is it can get a little confusing to the people enrolling in the program. They can, some people may say, I just want to enroll in one time and be done with it. So the way we created our enrollment process, people can do one enrollment for all the lists. So we kind of had it like a one-stop shop when it comes to enrolling in self-exclusion. And I think that's an important way to go. But yeah, there's definitely pros and cons to having them together and having them separate.
Very good. Thank you, Liz. And Laura, I'll come to you. I've spoken to operators who have said, look, the accessibility of online, you can understand why you want to have self-exclusion specifically for that, but some of those patrons want to go to a casino. Maybe they're there to see a show, or maybe they're there to dine. And to be excluded from that makes them not want to sign up for self-exclusion if it's all bunched together. What's your sense of how self-exclusion should be managed?
It is challenging for the operators in the current environment. As Liz was saying, Pennsylvania has multiple self-exclusion lists. Pretty much there's no one size fits all as we go around the country, which for us as operators, as we add on jurisdictions, then we have to customize to fit whatever the scenario is required there. Quite frankly, I think giving patrons choices and clear choices to determine how they want to utilize these tools is important. And right now, with multiple exclusion lists, as Liz indicated, it's confusing for the player, right? They're making a decision here. We shouldn't look for ways to make that more difficult. I'd say the basis, the foundation of the decision is tough enough. So how can we make that experience for that player who wants to do something affirmative more clear and easier to pursue? With the separate self-exclusion lists, it is, yes, I can understand a player who says, you know what, at home, I got to turn it off, but I want to be able to go out with my friends. I want to be able to go out to dinner at the casino. Quite frankly, maybe they even want to wager with their friends at the casino in a more controlled environment where it's not constantly in their face 24/7. We understand that. We're willing to work with whatever tools we're given, but for a lot of reasons, and I'm sure we'll go into those, standardizing this process a little bit more, streamlining it for the players, I think helps us reach our goals better than a little bit of the ad hoc approach that we're seeing across the country now.
Very good, thank you. And you're teasing our next question very, very well, Laura. But first I'll go to Stewart to weigh in on this question. You've been operating in a jurisdiction longer than most. What's your sense? How's it done in BC? And do you feel the separated approach makes sense or not?
So we have it linked. The only limitation we have is if you register for our voluntary self-exclusion program online, that doesn't transfer to land-based, and that's because our inability to get a picture of the player, do facial recognition, those types of steps. We're looking to see if we can solve that. We're also moving to a view of our customers, which we call Player 360, which is all data that we have on our customers all linked together, which I think is extremely important. So regardless of the list, I think having a single view of a customer allows you to recognize their gambling behaviors and recognize problematic gambling. So I do think there's a lot of value in having a single view of customer, but I'll go back to what Laura said. I think giving the players the choice is the most important thing, because there's some customers that play online with us that just want access to lottery products and just want to block the casino and sports products, or, so giving the players the ability to customize what they want to block, why they want to block it. And again, back to something Laura said, they're already in the midst of an extremely difficult decision. They're already at a point of contention in their own mind of, do I do it? Do I not do it? They're fighting their inner demons. And for us to put up roadblocks is just the absolute worst thing we could do in that space. So I think it's about choice. It's about clear choice, but I do think the power of the data of being able to recognize a customer from online to offline is extremely powerful.
Well, very good point. Thank you, Stewart. So let's talk about modernization and standardization. It does seem like a lot of decisions around responsible gaming are taken from what has been done previously in land-based. For example, some states still require the printing of self-exclusion forms, going to get them notarized, mailing them back in, waiting for a response before you enter the program. And some states in the US have adopted this format even for online. But Liz's state, for example, offers a simple online and KYC approach. Is there a right approach? Should we be offering a buffet for all? Should we be looking at online gaming differently if they can register and play online by going through an online process? Should they be able to self-exclude that way? How is it best looked at, and how should it be managed specifically for online? Liz, let's go to you again first, based on what you've chosen to do there.
Sure. So prior to 2017, when the new Gaming Act was passed to allow for iGaming and all the new gaming venues in Pennsylvania, our self-exclusion enrollment was in person only. And we kept it that way. We always discussed having an online enrollment, but we kept it in person only for so long because we really saw the benefit of that human interaction with people, being able to provide information directly, from one person to the next on treatment and things like that. And it was a benefit, and it helped an individual have that personal contact with somebody else who has been trained in problem gambling and things like that. But then with iGaming and this whole new world of online, we have to give these people an option. You can gamble from anywhere, so you should be able to technically self-exclude from anywhere. Now, once our offices are back open because of the pandemic, we will continue to allow people to come in to do the self-exclusion enrollments if they choose in office. So they can have that option. Unfortunately, right now with the pandemic, it's all online enrollments. But we do have, an employee who will talk on the phone with individuals enrolling and help them through the process. We just don't want to give up that human contact piece of it. So we're always there. We're always willing to, at least on the phone, speak with individuals. And again, once our offices are back open, we will allow for individuals to make appointments again to come in to do the enrollment process in person, because, and really with you see the younger population who wants nothing to do with that. They'll do everything online, be done with it. And then you see the older population saying, you know what, I need to know exactly what I'm getting into. I want to talk to somebody about it. I want to know exactly what this means. So I think it's important to have, a mix of both.
Very good, thank you. Kind of intimating what Laura was saying earlier. It's also, it seems like categories matter here, like sports betting is new and evolving in the US, tends to attract a younger male demographic in a lot of cases, and that's the only game they play. And they may be fully comfortable doing it online, but there's different customers for different products who need different. So the options, as Laura mentioned earlier, seems to make sense. Stewart, again, with the history you have in that market, anything you can glean on how to modernize and standardize some of this?
Yeah, I think again, it's about giving people the options of how they want to engage. So it's about giving the different options. If you want to do it online, that you provide that option. I think the other benefit of online that I would point to is you have the ability to have shorter term lockouts that are not your typical VSE windows. Typical VSE windows are going to be 6 months or beyond, just because of the oversight of ensuring that you're keeping people compliant. If you had people locking themselves out for 1 week from a land-based casino, it'd be quite problematic. Online, you can add those options. And I think it's very important to have those short-term lockouts that are precursors to a potential VSE, but at the same time, it could just be they recognize the need to save money over the next month for something, a specific purchase or something along those lines. I would also speak to the personal contact. So it's one of the things that we recognize is when people are gambling in their home, we have no idea of their environment, their current state. We have all those difficulties. And on top of that, you also have a person that could be going through a challenging situation and feeling very alone, depending on their living situation, depending on where they're gambling. And that can be very problematic. Over the past year during the pandemic, we actually implemented our GameSense advisors, which are player health trained advisors, onto Play Now, which is our online platform, and customers can reach them not just through the phone, but they can reach them through chat as well. So when customers just want to go on and have a little bit of a more passive interaction with these GameSense advisors, they can do that. And I think that hits on what Liz said. It's just, you have to make sure people have the support they need. It's not just a program of check boxes and making sure you lock them out of whatever gambling they want to be locked out of. It's what happens after that as well. How do you support them ongoing? When the VSE expires, what are you doing to help them re-enter safely and in a healthy fashion? I think that all plays a massive part of it.
Yeah, very, very well said. Good point, Stewart. And that it shows online is a different offering and something that we have to think about differently if we're going to be successful. Laura, what would you like to add on this point?
Well, to me, again, it's about choices and options, and the more that are available to address the situation, the better for the patron who needs help, right? So the idea of having the options for, they can just do it online, they can place a phone call, they can do an online chat, I think helps reach the broad demographic that we're seeing in online. Seth, as you said, sports betting patrons skew male and younger. We also have an iGAMING platform, and we're live in a number of states. And we see generally the tendency there is more 50-50 with females and of an older age demographic than the sports wagering patrons. So we're seeing a broad base of the population, entertaining themselves with our platform. But when they need that reach out, whatever is comfortable for that person should be an option. As for that face-to-face or in-person phone contact with the regulators, I'm a big fan. And here and there, I guess through this conversation, I'll do a little compare and contrast of different approaches in different jurisdictions in the US. But New York State, where there are commercial casinos, tribal casinos, racinos, racetracks, DFS, pretty wide selection of gaming channels. For a commercial operator, that casino has to register people for self-exclusion in the casino. It is not the State Gaming Commission that is doing that. They have put that burden on the casino itself. And I would imagine that could be troubling for somebody who is delving into this. I want to speak to someone or see someone and fill out the paperwork, but I have to go into the casino to do that. There are different ways to approach it. Again, compare and contrast to what is offered, say, in Pennsylvania, where that contact is through the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board, or as Stewart was saying, in British Columbia, you've got trained folks that are available to help folks with these choices. So although I think this is a partnership between all of us, regulators, operators, mental health professionals. I mean, there's so many stakeholders that go into addressing this, but is now a time to modernize that approach, maybe make that approach more consistent for the good of those patrons reaching out. I'm a definite proponent of that. And by the way, if we haven't learned anything else in the past 15 months, it's that we can change quickly, we can adapt, we can find new ways, better ways to use technology to address a situation we didn't anticipate with COVID. This may very well be the time to embrace a different approach.
Terrific. No doubt COVID has impacted a lot, and we have change. And when there was only an in-person option, state, everyone's had to adjust to give consumers different choice. But we can all agree in essence that sort of a notarize, print out a form, mail it in, wait 45 days approach, which I won't name the state, but that does exist as the only option for some consumers for online gaming. We got to do better than that. We need to modernize and give more tools. All right, I'm going to move on to a subject, and Liz, I'll direct this one your way. Maybe people don't know, but not every state regulator employs a Liz Lanza on their staff, someone who's dedicated, responsible gaming. And you've developed a reputation as being progressive and ahead of the industry on responsible gaming in your state, and you deserve a lot of credit for that. Can you speak to your role there and your ability to have a seat at the table, and how important you think that is for regulators to employ someone dedicated to responsible gaming like PA has? Because again, a lot of states have not taken this approach, and they have no one sort of championing the responsible gaming efforts there.
Yeah, I do think it's important. We were super lucky to have Nan Horner was my predecessor. And she really, she was the first director of the Office of Compulsive and Problem Gambling, and she took the ball and ran with it and passed the torch on to me when she left. And I think it's important to, hey, even if, you don't have the ability to have a director level employee, have some employee dedicated to responsible gaming, problem gambling policies, things like that. Yeah, I do. I think it's invaluable. And I think that every state, every regulator needs somebody to kind of hold up that mirror and say, look, let's look and see first at what this policy could cause. And I think that it should be the goal of all regulators to have somebody on staff dedicated to responsible gaming.
Thank you. I think it's a very important point that any new jurisdictions coming on board really need to look at and think about, because it's a world of difference having someone like Liz operating in a jurisdiction with a state that doesn't have it, because they tend to just get bogged down in the administrative functions around administering a self-exclusion program and that type of thing, and their duties end there. And there's so much more to problem gambling and responsible gaming and the cooperative effort it takes of everyone. So I applaud Pennsylvania. It's great, Liz. that you're there. Stewart, I want to go to you and talk about the culture and emphasis on responsible gaming, because BCLC, if I'm correct, was the first to launch the GameSense program, and renowned for that. And you seem to have a culture there that really emphasizes responsible gaming. Can you talk about the organization there and how it instills that in the team and how it can be effective for others to look to what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I go back to what Liz said. I mean, at BCLC, we've had a responsible gambling team since I got here 10 years ago. They've done a great job of what I would say transitioning from responsible gambling to player health, recognizing that all levels of player health are not just, people becoming addicted to the products. There are other aspects to player health. And as an organization, we have 3 pillars, and one of those pillars is responsible growth. So we didn't want to focus just on the revenue. We want to focus on how are we attaining that revenue. And one of the objectives under that is to gain no revenue from unhealthy play. And what I would say over the last 5 years, what I've seen at BCLC is it's become less of a stage gate. It's become less of, a checkbox or a necessary evil that you need to put every game and every promotion through, a review to make sure that it's on point and it's not going to cause players any issues. It's become now much more embedded. And we have people like myself who, in my position, at the end of the day, my position is to generate revenue off of the Play Now platform. But I'm just as engaged in player health as the people on the player health team. And they've done a great job of embedding in the culture, making sure that everybody understands when you show up and you say, we need to stop doing X and Y, and it's going to impact the revenue, but it's the right thing for the customer, that you don't feel any fear in bringing that forward. That has to be a part of the culture. And at BCLC, we have achieved that culture where we always put the player health lens on everything we do.
Very good. Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Great to know the alignment there on the operator side as well. I'm going to switch to another question here because it kind of dovetails nicely on what you said, Stewart, and maybe Laura will give you the first crack. And then Stewart, you can weigh in too. Can technology be a great equalizer for responsible gaming? Because I've heard about machine learning and AI tools that connect to operator platforms that can help identify problem gamblers very early in the journey. Have any of you seen any of these potential solutions, and what type of promise do they hold? Laura, maybe ask you that.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting contacted on a fairly regular basis from companies that are starting to offer these services to assist with, providing tools so that we can better monitor player behavior. And, the online space, right? We know everything. We know who the player is. There's no anonymity, right? Very different than the land-based. We know who they are. We know when they're gambling, what they're gambling. There's no guesswork. There's no, as in the land-based, the floor person standing there with a card, writing things down and being, subjective somewhat in what is being recorded and when it's being recorded. Online, we know immediately. So are these type of tools something that, do I think this may be the future? Yes, but with caution. I think it's still new. I think getting back to a foundation that that impacts us all in this discussion, right? With a problem gambling disorder, none of us in this group can diagnose it, treat it, or cure it. And we are here to provide education, to provide tools, resources, and when we think it appropriate based on our risk profile, et cetera, have a conversation with our customer. And sort of where is that line? And where is that line on privacy information and what we do with the information we take in? So balance that a little bit with the data privacy discussion, which is another topic altogether. But how is that going to integrate into our systems? I look forward to learning more about it. I am learning more about it all the time and figuring out how that best integrates with our culture of corporate social responsibility and our toolbox for our players to better assist them so that they can make their good choices, or have a way for us, again, a little different than the land-based, if we clearly see that something is amiss, we have the ability to, stop their account instantaneously, which is a little different than the land-based, where it's not as immediate or predictable. So I think these tools are great, and I think we'll figure out how to better use them.
Very good, thank you. Yeah, and you bring up the point of knowing your customer online is a key thing here that allows you the ability. And Stewart, I would imagine, your job is to grow revenue there. These tools also work to identify players on an individual basis and what their habits and patterns are and who's most likely to spend more or what game types they choose and all that stuff. Have you delved into AI or machine learning as it relates to the problem gambling area, and do you see potential there?
We have, but I would say it's still early days. We've tried a couple of different approaches to it to try and see what we could do for a predictive model to recognize player behavior. I agree with Laura that we're still a ways away from knowing exactly the best way to use it. We recognize that true intervention in the sense of stopping a player from gambling and not allowing them to gamble. In our province, in the online space, we have a number of illegal operators. So likely we just push them into the waiting arms of somebody else who doesn't have their best interest at heart. So we have to be very cautious with that. The other thing is go back to the data, because again, it's about pulling the data together of everything you know about a customer. I can think of 5-6 cases this year where we've seen a player's play escalate quite significantly after COVID hit. In some cases, it wasn't land-based play that was moving to the online space, at least not that we could see. And it was just an escalation, potentially because they're stuck at home and they don't have anything else to do. In other cases, it was online or land-based play moving to online. So again, I go back to you need to get the data. And once you have a good data set and you can start to recognize things, then you start with the soft nudges. Then you start with those softer activities that can try and push a player in the right direction. And at certain points, we have closed an account. And we've essentially said when the player called in, we just want to make sure this is you gambling, your account hasn't been hacked. We try and get a sense for the customer if they could need some support from a game sense advisor. And those conversations have been very positive. The outcomes have been around more education on the way gambling works and things of that nature. So I think going back again to what Laura said, it's going to be about how do we use the tools effectively, because just the tools themselves aren't going to get us to the promised land.
Very good. And yeah, to Laura's point, we're not clinicians and all the staff, and we have to be careful of how we intercede with a customer in these cases. But it will be great if this stuff evolves to a manner that we can at least find the signals of harm that are potentially there, because let's face it, self-exclusion is sort of an ended journey result, and the real goal for all of us is to stop problem gambling earlier in its tracks, where it becomes responsible gambling at the end of the day. Laura, I want to come to you back to self-exclusion a bit on the difficulty of managing a self-exclusion program. It seems hard from an operator's perspective, and if there was a centralized system in the US for iGaming, would that be appealing to you? Because I've heard from operators who expect difficulties around the different data that they get from each state and the fuzzy logic and not always knowing who the person is and the methods for retrieving it and trying to get it uploaded into your system to prevent that. Would it be beneficial from an administration standpoint for an operator if it could become automated and standardized, and maybe lean into a little bit of the problems that exist there?
Yeah, I think I want to start out with the need for consistency. And this is going to hit a lot of categories. Consistency in what information is being taken in by about the player. We've had situations, and understand another arm of Rush Street is Rush Street Gaming, which operates a few casinos in the country, and some, again, compare and contrast that we see. what information was put about that person's name? Is it Matt Jones or Matthew Jones? Are they going to pick up and match, right? Or do we have, as we call it, fuzzy matches? You had used the term fuzzy. We need consistency in what information is being gathered. We need consistency on the timeframes that are being offered to players for self-exclusion. You know, those vary in every state. We need consistency in what method the player needs to follow to get removed from a self-exclusion list. Some expire at the end of their terms. Some require the player to take an affirmative step and file a petition or a request to the gaming board to come off. That is something that some consistency from an operator standpoint would help, because we don't know when they come off. There's no way to predict, because they'll contact us and say, okay, my 3 years is up, I'm ready to play. But perhaps it's a state that requires them to take an affirmative step with the regulator before they come off. Consistency in limits, right? We happen to offer a cool-off period on our platform. We offer the ability to limit your deposits, the amount of money you wager in a day, a week, a month, how often you can withdraw, you know, how much, you know, the time you're playing, etc. So lots of tools there. I think a consistent process with those things being available across the board, you know, would be helpful. The other piece of this, where would an online database solve this problem potentially, is how we get the information. So in a number of jurisdictions, we are tethered to a casino license partner, and that particular state agency may have a policy that that self-exclusion list only goes to the casino. And then the casino people are manually inputting the new names onto the list. And then it goes through their casino management system and integrates over to us. So we now pick that up. We have seen situations where human error, both on the side of the casino and on the side of the regulator, the data that's been input has something wrong. There's a typo, it doesn't match. So I think a system, whereas even if it's just for each state, and then hopefully eventually some central database, where that list can come directly to us, so there's no reliance on some manual input in between. Also, it would help us know when something's effective. Now we're dependent on when the casino gets that input and it goes through the system and comes to us. We need more direct integration of the information to make this truly work better. The idea, the concept of a central system for online gambling, you know, throughout, let's say throughout the US, you know, is a tempting concept. And Liz and I have talked about this in other occasions. It's not as easy as it sounds to have a one-size-fits-all, because even as Liz sees in Pennsylvania, she's got multiple laws that govern multiple lists. So how do we get all of those states talking to integrate into a central system, I think is a discussion point we in the industry have been having for a while. I'm not real sure how that's progressing at this point, but I think it is a topic we need to continue to talk about and look at. And then crossing borders, right, as now we know, you know, for us, we're looking at the Ontario market, which is going to be opening up for iGaming, and looking at opportunities that we're going to be seeing, you know, through Canada, also operations in South America. I mean, remember, problem gambling knows no borders. And so right now, the fact that things are different state to state, I don't know that that is fundamentally getting to the problem, right? I think it's just, it's putting a fence up, but maybe creating an unintended arbitrary result from that. So I think that there is potential, if all of the legal issues, regulatory issues, data privacy issues could be resolved, to have sort of a central database maybe we're going to get there. But I know those are things that you, Seth, and you, Liz, talk about from different perspectives and looking for solutions along the way to build some consensus here.
Yeah, very good. Look, you raise a lot of points and a lot of issues and a lot of friction. And I think it's important we all take a step back and go to what you guys have echoed throughout this discussion is we need to focus on the consumer and what's best for the consumer and giving them choice. And some of this is quite difficult for them to wrap their heads around. And to your point, the problem is not solved inside one border. So Liz, maybe to ask you, how feasible would it be for different state regulators to work together on something like this? I know you've joined the Play Pause program. I can explain that a little bit after, but a multi-jurisdictional approach. Are there discussions amongst regulators? Should there be? How big a proponent are you of, say, a self-exclusion system built for the entire industry?
I think it's a great idea. I've been in multiple discussions with multiple other jurisdictions, other regulators, operators on how to move forward on a nationwide self-exclusion program. And like Laura said, it is going to be hard. It is going to be difficult with all of the different regulations and the different laws. And, this state, like Pennsylvania, may have an arrest policy where that state doesn't, and things like that. But like Laura said earlier, we're in times now where things are changing, things are moving, and we have to adapt and adapt quickly. And I think that as long as we keep moving forward in discussions, I think that it is something that can be done. And it is something that is possible in some form or another. When Conscious Gaming brought the Play Pause program to Pennsylvania and introduced us to it, and I thought, okay, at the extremely very least, this could be beginning steps towards something like that. And I just think having a tool that can allow people to say, you know what, I want to make that step of self-excluding myself from, multiple jurisdictions. Having a tool in place like Play Pause is something that can empower the consumer, empower the person in their journey in this, world of addiction. And I think it can be done. I think it will be difficult. And, we're just still in those discussions of how we can work all the policies or none of the policies and have just a very generalized type of self-exclusion. But yeah, it's in discussions. I've been in discussions for many years with other groups and jurisdictions. And most other jurisdictions and regulators and operators would like to move forward on something, especially in the iGaming world. It makes it a little bit different or a little bit easier in the self-exclusion atmosphere of, taking it across the border. So I think it's definitely the way of the future. I think we're going to see us moving closer and closer to a more nationwide type of self-exclusion. It's just how, we're at that phase where what will benefit the person who's enrolling more, and how can we do that as regulators? How can we get that information to operators and things like that? So we're not there yet, but I feel like, in the next few years, we're definitely going to be moving in that direction.
Very good. And for iGaming particularly, it seems like there's a way to solve it when we talk about knowing your customer and all this sort of thing. I will say, selfishly, I've been with Conscious Gaming less than a year. I had hair when I started, so I know how quickly and how difficult this issue is. But I can tell you Play Pause does believe it has a solution that can help fill a lot of these gaps with technology. There's really two key points that we're focused on bringing to the industry. And that's really a global unique player identifier, a way that all of us are dealing with the same player and we solve all those fuzzy logic and issues around the Matthew, Matt, and all those sorts of things. And we believe we have a clever solution to that. And the other piece is trying to keep each database holder, each jurisdiction in control of the rules they want to set but still allow the information sharing to occur. So it would be great, to some of the points Laura made, of getting standardization around the term lengths that each consumer should use and how to come on and off lists and all those things. And that takes industry discussion and getting comfort around those sorts of things. But there seems to be a way now, technology-wise, for iGaming to solve both database, data privacy, all those kind of concerns, and knowing the right customer. So hopefully we're moving in the right direction there. Stewart, I want to move the discussion along to talk about research. How important is it for the industry to share information for research purposes? I noticed, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with this specific, but I saw a University of British Columbia survey or research piece that they did recently that looked at online play data from over 30,000 individuals from your platform. Were you involved in that? Why were you guys willing to share that information? How do you think research and understanding this customer better would be helpful for the industry?
Yeah, so I was involved. I would say in kind of an advisory role and working with them to discuss some of the terminology and things that they were using. I think it's important to share because at BCLC, I mean, obviously we're a government regulated website, so we need to put our reports on things like public or problem gambling public. So it is a requirement, but at the same time, I think sharing research across different operators and across different regions just allows for much better conversation about what we're seeing, especially if you look right now at sports and this new sports betting market that we're seeing in North America. We have a youth that does not understand the perils of sports betting. You have young males that have escalated belief in themselves and their ability to place wagers successfully on sports. You have young males that will mislead themselves into how successful they are. We saw the same thing with the poker boom. So when you look at something like sports, there was an opportunity before all of this really took off for groups to get together and have those conversations and understand where those impacts are. Right now, we're watching the US. We don't have single event betting in British Columbia. Hopefully that will be coming soon. But what we're trying to do is look at what everybody else is seeing so we can adapt to that and learn from that. And I think it's also important to make sure that player health and responsible gambling is put on the same level as revenue generation or products and things of that nature. When you go to the conferences historically, what you see is, the responsible gambling area pushed to the corner or pushed to the back, and you've got all these fancy slot machines that everybody's, gathered around. And it's just not right. It should be put on that exact same level. It should get the same importance. I know at BCLC, we run New Horizons every year, springtime of every year, which is, we put it out there as an opportunity for everybody to gather, share their learning, share best practices. I think it's absolutely crucial because a lot of these, these challenges these players are having, they don't have borders. The customer's experience doesn't have a border. So when we're trying to determine how to help them, we should also try and remove those borders.
Very good. Thank you. That there's no doubt sharing best practices and learning and the treasure trove of data can be very helpful here in the iGaming market. We are running up against our time here, so just a little more to go. Laura, maybe to you on what should a good responsible gaming program entail for an operator perspective? What types of tools or safety measures should be available to players? Let's focus this on the online market.
Sure. Well, look, first off, in an organization, it starts at the top with the culture, right? So to Stewart's point, that the culture, the commitment to social responsibility and responsible gaming awareness, education, and provision of the right tools is the beginning. Then it goes to the rest of the organization, right? So that's where you pick up the team member education, the reinforcement programs, the awareness, support within the organization. So it's clear that that message is there, and that the balance of the revenue generation and the responsible gaming commitment are not diametrically opposed at all. They're actually blended together. We don't want someone with a gambling problem wagering on our site, period. You're going to hear that from every operator. That's not what this is about. In the regulated environment, we take this very, very seriously. Next is collaboration, collaboration on many levels, starting within the organization. In our organization, we involve various departments in our discussions about how we want to approach responsible gambling, and whether it is our engineers, our product developers, our marketing team, our compliance team, our customer service reps, our VIP department. Everybody is a part of that conversation and is not only comfortable speaking about it, but wants to speak about it, because we're all bound together to do the right thing. So you make the right culture choice, you educate, you make folks aware, you collaborate. Then what does the player see with all of this foundation? So they're going to see tools like, you can go onto your account, you can set up your limits, you can set up how you want to play, how much you want to play, where you want to cool off. The self-exclusion programs are available for the links to the appropriate regulators as to how to pursue those options. So make sure those things are available. And quite frankly, to participate in discussions just like this, collaborating across the industry with different stakeholders to support each other, to support that culture that, as I think we are all working toward, and to explore as a group, do we need more information? Do we need more research? I think that answer is always yes. So how do we support the research? How do we get the research focused and going to help us all in how to do this? So for me and for Rush Street Interactive, I mean, that's how we see the best way to develop the program and make it, part of our lifeblood, quite frankly, in how we do business.
Well, very good. Yeah, and I think Stewart, their program there is almost world renowned at this point for what they do, and it does start with that culture and spreading it across the thing. All right, I think we have time for one more question for each of you. So let me start here with Liz on something that I'm curious about. Are finances and resources a factor? So, Pennsylvania, which has full iGaming, has the highest tax rate of any US jurisdiction, yet the market is thriving, both from a consumer participation standpoint and an operator business perspective standpoint, it would appear. Is this providing you as a state more resources to address problem gambling? And if so, do you see that as an effective way for other states to follow?
So in Pennsylvania, our act states that each type of gaming, they have to contribute out of the taxes 0.002% of the gross revenue for that type of gaming, iGaming, casinos, VGTs, fantasy, sports. And it goes into a fund that gets directed to our Department of Drug and Alcohol programs. I think that for at least in Pennsylvania, yeah, it's great. There's that set amount every year, and I shouldn't even say set amount, but that set percentage every year that goes towards the treatment and prevention side of gambling addiction. And I think that it doesn't necessarily mean that more taxes and taxing at a higher rate equals that. I think though that more funding always needs to go to problem gambling and responsible gambling. I think that when you look at other addictions and you see how much gets divvied up upon each addiction, gambling is at the very bottom. It helps in Pennsylvania that it's right in the act and it's right there and it's coming right out of the pot. So yes, that's definitely a benefit, but I don't think that it necessarily needs, the high tax rate needs to be there. I think that it needs to come from somewhere, of course. And like I said, it's very easy for us in Pennsylvania because it's written into the act. But I will never say, well, I shouldn't say never, but I can never foresee me saying that, there doesn't need to be any more funding going to problem gambling research and prevention and treatment. I think that and for many years to follow and many years to come. I think that we're always going to be, out there begging, pleading for more money, for more research money, for more treatment money. And regardless of where it comes from, we need more of it. But yeah, it is helpful in Pennsylvania that it's right there written into the act. We don't have to go necessarily searching for that funding, where other states may have to get creative in where and how they get their funding. But again, it's not, I don't think that the higher tax rate is necessarily a, must have.
Okay, very good. Yeah, and I certainly federal dollars would be nice. And I kind of feel like I have Keith White on my shoulder there from NCPG pounding me to say, get the feds to do something like they contribute to alcohol and drug and other issues. Gambling is an addiction. It's a small percentage of people affected, but they deserve the resources to help them battle when they get there. So Laura, maybe it's not fair to ask the same question in reverse, but I was trying to understand whether lawmakers should be aware before signing bills into law, and the resources from an operator standpoint, do they change based on the market framework in essence?
No. The importance of, appropriate funding for responsible gaming resources, problem gaming resources is, again, the problem knows no borders. The states like Pennsylvania that build it into the law and provide for it, I think is an incredibly healthy approach, because it sets the commitment from the beginning. And so you can plan that you have this funding coming in. States that don't provide this, and then that state council on problem gambling is out there, soliciting support and, trying to sustain themselves to provide the same kind of resources that a program that is statutorily funded by operators in another state, those agencies, those problem gaming councils have tough resources too. So to now have to have a further arm to develop financial resources to support them is maybe not the highest and best use of their purpose. For us is to, yes, Pennsylvania has the highest tax rate. That's a given. Does that change how we approach responsible gaming there versus New Jersey or New York or anywhere else? Absolutely not.
Okay.
Completely different topic.
Very good. Thank you. All right, let's, one last question, Stewart, I'll throw it your way because I think it affects everyone, whether you're an operator, regulator, a consumer participating, the offshore markets. And you touched upon this a little bit, and we know that responsible gaming measures are really non-existent for offshore operators. They're not compelled by any jurisdiction to do anything for the most part. So with single event sports betting potentially coming to British Columbia, Stewart, what's your sense currently of how much of the market, say BCLC, has that's going to offshore, and how can responsible gaming measures you employ be a differentiator in the future?
Yeah, so as far as the revenue, it's obviously through research and looking at per capita performance of other jurisdictions. We peg ourselves at about 65 to 70% of the market captured. Obviously, some products like sports, since we don't have single event, while our illegal competitors do have single event, it's very difficult for us to compete. So in a product like that, we're closer to probably 15 or 20%. This is one of the main reasons that BC, and we're working with our regulator and our government right now to retain the model we have, but find ways to limit the illegal market. One of the big reasons is player health. We know as a fact, when you look at, some of these illegal operators are regulated in other jurisdictions. It's just the criminal code that they're afoul of in Canada. So they actually operate with the customer's best intentions in mind. But there's obviously some of those that don't, some that are just there to make a quick buck, some that don't have any protections for players. So we do believe that we need to get to a point where we can actually protect the population of BC. And the only way we could do that is to make sure they're playing on a regulated website where we have oversight as a government of BC. So that's what we're trying to work towards.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, I think we should wrap up our discussion there. We've gone the allotted time. I want to thank each of you for being here today and sharing this information. This is exactly what can be very helpful to others as they look to get into this business or from where they sit in the industry, sharing stories, working together, collaborating as this new iGaming really takes hold in North America. So thank you, Liz, Laura, and Stewart, for your time today, and for Sigma for giving us the platform to discuss it. Take care.